Welcome back to Interpretations. I'm Owen Gray. In this series, we are taking a critical look at Ralph Ellison's novel Invisible Man from 1952, considering the racial context and what he can teach us today. I've divided the chapter into 6 parts, and this is part 4. To watch parts 1 through 3, take a look here for the playlist. In part 1, The Grandfather's Curse, we met the narrator and saw that he was struggling with his place in racial society after his grandfather labeled himself a race traitor. In part 2, The Pre-Fight Entertainment, we looked at the symbolic resonances of the nude blonde and saw that the cruelty of the white men unmasked. In part 3, The Titular Battle Royal, we saw the black teenagers pitted against each other for the sick amusement of the white men. And now we've reached part 4, the title match. Pay close attention in this section for the narrator's internal monologue during the fight and for contradictory and self-contradictory elements within the text. Content warnings for this section of the text include depictions of violence, anti-black racism, and some strong language. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the novel.
I was fighting automatically when suddenly I noticed that one after another of the boys was leaving the ring. I was surprised, filled with panic, as though I had been left alone with an unknown danger. Then I understood. The boys had arranged it among themselves. It was the custom for the 2 men left in the ring to slug it out for the winner's prize. I discovered this too late.
I've always found this section interesting. When did the other teenagers decide this? When did they have the time to arrange it amongst themselves? Did the other teenagers know ahead of time that the narrator had, quote, deprived, unquote, their friend of a night's work? If not, when were they alone to communicate this without the narrator noticing?
When the bell sounded, 2 men in tuxedos leaped into the ring and removed the blindfold. I found myself facing Tatlock, the biggest of the gang. I felt sick at my stomach. Hardly had the bell stopped ringing in my ears than it had clanged again, and I saw him moving swiftly toward me. Thinking of nothing else to do, I hit him smash on the nose. He kept coming, bringing the rank, sharp violence of stale sweat. His face was a black blank of a face, only his eyes alive, with hate of me and aglow with a feverish terror from what happened to us all. I became anxious. I wanted to deliver my speech, and he came at me as though he meant to beat it out of me. I smashed him again and again, taking his blows as they came. Then, of a sudden impulse, I struck him lightly, and as we clinched, I whispered, "Fake like I knocked you out. You can have the prize." "I'll break your behind," he whispered hoarsely. "For them?" "For me, son of a bitch!"
Now, I find this section baffling. Why does the narrator think he can convince Tatlock to take the fall? Every time I reread this chapter, this is a section that catches me. I know in literary studies we're supposed to work with the text as it is and not deal with counterfactuals or hypotheticals, but I really can never stop myself from imagining the narrator saying, "I'll take the fall, like you knocked me out. You can have the prize." And I can't imagine, actually, Tatlock saying anything different in that hypothetical than what he says here. So what do we know about the narrator at this point? He views himself as superior to the other black teenagers. He wants validation from the white audience. He wants his dignity to be respected. And he's terrified. If we look at the character traits he's exhibited in the chapter so far, we can begin, maybe, to make sense of why he wants to be the victor. Earlier he said he was afraid that the battle royal would detract from the dignity of his speech. We can make an inference that he's worried the white folk won't take his speech as seriously if he were to lose the battle. So, while he earlier constructed a hierarchy with intellect on top, he wants to show himself superior in both physical strength and intellectual achievement to make himself seem worthy to the white folk. This reminds me of an idea that's kind of pervasive in culture, that a woman or a black person has to be twice as good as a white man to be seen as half as capable. And I wonder if that idea was present in Ellison's time, and if he's kind of implying that here with the narrator wanting to both win the fight and deliver his speech.
They were yelling for us to break it up, and Tatlock spun me half around with a blow, and as a joggled camera sweeps in a reeling scene, I saw the howling red faces crouching tense beneath the cloud of blue-gray smoke.
This image of a joggled camera sweeping a reeling scene always makes me pause. It takes me out of the text to use the language of a writing workshop, and this is purely my own ahistorical reading. The idea of video cameras joggling seems later than the 1950s to me, and I have to remind myself that the first cinema-style films actually debuted in the 1890s.
For a moment the world wavered, unraveled, flowed, then my head cleared, and Tatlock bounced before me. That fluttering shadow before my eyes was his jabbing left hand. Then, falling forward, my head against his damp shoulder, I whispered, "I'll make it $5 more." "Go to hell!" But his muscles relaxed a trifle beneath my pressure, and I breathed, "7?" "Give it to your ma," he said, ripping me beneath the heart.
Again, I always find it fascinating that even this far into the fight he's trying to negotiate with Tatlock. They are operating on two different levels, and that impedes them from being successful in communicating with one another.
And while I still held him, I butted him and moved away. I felt myself bombarded with punches. I fought back with hopeless desperation. I wanted to deliver my speech more than anything else in the world, felt that only these men could judge truly my ability, and now this stupid clown was ruining my chances.
And here, in this section, we finally get confirmation of some of the statements that I've been making along about the narrator's internalized white supremacy and his need for validation from the white folk. He's hinted at it previously in the text, but here he says it unambiguously. Only these men, meaning of course the white men, could judge truly my ability. While we may have suspected the narrator of harboring white supremacist ideas despite his being black, he shows himself, here, I think, to really believe it.
I began fighting carefully now, moving in to punch him and then out again with my greater speed. A lucky blow to his chin, and I had him going, too, until I heard a loud voice yell, "I got my money on the big boy!" Hearing this, I almost dropped my guard. I was confused. Should I try to win against the voice out there? Would not this go against my speech? And was not this the moment for humility, for non-resistance? A blow to my head as I danced about sent my right eye popping like a jack-in-the-box and settled my dilemma.
This strikes me as one of the contradictory moments in the text. Before the fight, the narrator was concerned that participating in the fight itself would lower the white men's impression of him. During the earlier parts of the fight, he was concerned that losing the fight would detract from the white folks' perception of his speech. Now he's concerned that his success would contradict the message of his speech. In essence, he has held double consciousness throughout the fight. Instead of being able to focus on the fight, he's trying to make sure his performance is palatable to the whites. Now, on the level of the text, I've never been entirely sure how literally to interpret the phrase, "the right eye popping like a jack-in-the-box." Apparently, it is possible for an eye to pop out in the midst of a fight and to be put in with very little damage to the optic nerve if it's done quickly, so it is possible that he's describing literally what happened.
The room went red as I fell. It was a dream fall, my body languid and fastidious as to where to land, until the floor became impatient and smashed up to meet me. A moment later I came to. An hypnotic voice said 5 emphatically, and I lay there, hazily watching a dark red spot of my own blood shaping itself into a butterfly, glistening and soaking into the soiled gray world of the canvas. When the voice drawled, 10, I was lifted up and dragged to a chair. I sat dazed. My eye pained and swelled with each throb of my pounding heart, and I wondered if now I would be allowed to speak. I was wringing wet, my mouth still bleeding. We were grouped along the wall now. The other boys ignored me as they congratulated Tatlock and speculated as to how much they would be paid. One boy whimpered over his smashed hand. Looking up front, I saw attendants in white jackets rolling the portable ring away and placing a small square rug in the vacant space surrounded by chairs. Perhaps, I thought, I will stand on the rug to deliver my speech.
And that's the end of part 4, the title match. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to having conversation with you in the comments below. If you liked this video, please give it a like, and if you didn't like it, well, go ahead and give it a dislike. If you think others would like this video, I would appreciate it if you would share it on social media. If you like the work that I'm doing, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/owenxgrey. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/owenxgrey or on Facebook at facebook.com/owenxgrey. Tune in next week for part 5, the rewards. And until then, keep interpreting.